Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Let's sing it together. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's nice to see people gathered here and gathered online. People who are here in this space have lots of things in their vicinity, some papers, some personal items, lots of different kinds of books. But the most important book you need right now is our prayer book. And the prayer book says Mishkan Tefillah on the cover. If you have one, like Rabbi Green does, will you hold it up? Hold it up just like this so everyone can see it. Now make sure that the book you're holding up actually is this book. You might be holding up another book, which is the same color but has different title. Hold it up again. See, it has sort of a flame on it. You need the book with the flame on it. If you are looking around and you can't find a book like that, you can put your book down. Raise your empty hand if you need a prayer book, and one of our wonderful greeters will come bring you one. So if anyone needs a prayer book, just raise your empty hand. Thank you, and we'll make sure you get one. And in the meantime, let's keep singing together. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. These books open from right to left because they are mostly in Hebrew. More on that later. So we open them now from right to left and look in the lower right-hand corner for page 192. Page 192 in the lower right. You may have a version with two numbers in the lower right. We'll be referring to the numbers in brackets throughout our time together. So look carefully for the bracketed page 192. And on that page in blue, you'll see the words Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu. Again, 192 in brackets, the lower right. Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu. Alecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Yisrael Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu, let's try it together. Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu, that's the idea. A little more. Ma Tovu, Ma Tovu, Vani berov chasdecha avo veitecha Eshtach vel heichal kodshecha beiratecha Ma Tovu, you know it. Ma Tovu, a little louder. Ma Tovu, you sound beautiful already. How about that? Ma Tovu, Ma Tovu. 192. Vani tefilati lecha, Adonai et ratzon, Elohim berov chastecha, Aneni be'emet yishecha. Ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Ma tovu, how good it is to be in this space. And it really, really does feel good. Something about that Shabbat breeze in this space this summer feels unusual.
It is really unusual in a good way.
And what a fantastic treat for today's Shabbat. And I have to say, I've been waiting for this Shabbat for quite some time, for at least 6 days. Because for 6 days, I'll get there, don't worry, but we'll start with this. For 6 days, we work very hard. We work to prove ourselves. We work to produce. But here, we come to this space on the 7th day on Shabbat just to be, to breathe, to pray, to sing, to meditate, to be together, to remember the fact that we are alive and that we have value because we are alive. It is that basic thing that we are really here to do today. And doing that is actually hard work. It's hard work to not work. You actually have to bring yourself to it. And so we ask that you really try to surprise yourself by participating, singing out loud, or maybe louder than you normally might, finding some text in this prayer book that is unusual, something that feels good. And I should say that this prayer book has within it so many different ideas, prayers, arguments, and there may be some things in this text, this prayer book, that you don't connect to. It's okay. Just be present. Just find something that does feel good, because that is the point, to experience this space and this time together. Now, I should also say that I have been waiting for today for almost 2 years, as many of you have, as we watch our first 4 adult B'nai Mitzvah get called to the Torah. So we'll do that in a little bit. After the beginning of our service, we'll get to the Torah service as these friends, these community members, people who have worked so hard for this day, are called to the Torah. But first, to get into the space, the prayerful headspace, we begin with Asher Yatzar, a prayer that reminds us of our bodies and the miracle of being alive, having bodies that facilitate our being in this space.
This is a prayer inspired by the words on page 194. I thank you for my life, body and soul. Help me realize I am beautiful and whole. I'm perfect the way I am, and a little broken too. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. Oh, can you with me? Oh, a little higher. I thank you for my life, body and soul. Help me realize I am beautiful and whole. Help me realize I am beautiful and whole. I'm perfect the way I am and a little broken too. I'm perfect the way I am and a little broken too. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. Oh, oh, oh. Higher. Oh. higher still. The middle of 194. Baruch atah Adonai Rofeh chol basar umafli la'asot Baruch atah Adonai Rofeh chol basar umafli la'asot. Miracles for every day, page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasech vivina lehavchin ben yom uvein layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asuri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim. 200. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who stretches the earth over the waters. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who strengthens our steps. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who clothes the naked. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who gives strength to the weary. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. Hamavir sheina me'enai, utnuma me'af apai. 202. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. She'asani b'tselem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me free. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who girds Yisrael with strength. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Yisrael with splendor. We're going to turn now to page 218, and we're going to invite each of you to rise if you're able, to take yourself, the people you came with, and your prayer book right up here, next to me, next to Rabbi Green, in front of us, behind us, all around us. We're going to get closer together, get to know each other better, sing some more. 218. Oh, this is moving up music. Oh, come all the way up. You can come around us. Make a circle. Oh, 218. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Fill in the space in front of us. Hallelujah. Come on up. Hallelujah, 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 El Bekodsho, hallelujah, El Bekodsho, hallelujah, Virkia Uzo. Come on, Millis. Hallelujah, Vigvurotav, hallelujah, Kerov Gudo. Hallelujah, here we go. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Stomp your feet if you want. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You can clap your hands. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. What's the sound of one hand clapping? Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Beteka shofar, hallelujah. Beteka shofar, hallelujah. Benevel vechinor. Keep moving up, Nudson. Hallelujah, betofu machol. Hallelujah, beminim veugal. Everyone, hallelujah, hallelujah. I cannot hear you. Louder from the aisle. Let them know you're there. Even more, hallelujah, 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 Hallelu v'tzirtzei shama, Hallelu v'tzirtzei truah, kol hanshama te'aleluya, Hallelu, Hallelujah. Now just a whisper, Hallelu, 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 Hallelu. You can breathe. Hallelu, 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 Hallelu. Ooh, that was nice. Doesn't it feel nice and cool up here? Yeah, so you should come stay closer more often.
It does feel cool, and yet I'm sweating anyway. But just a rousing Psalm 150. You have all been warmed up now, so take a moment, wish someone you don't know Shabbat Shalom, maybe say hi to someone you do know, take a minute, make this a very, very, very friendly place.
And we're going to stay here for a little while after. All right, we invite you to stay up here for a little while longer as we turn to page 224 for Chatzi Kaddish. We all face this way towards Jerusalem. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba be'almat yivrach chilutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael b'hagala u'bizman kariv v'yimeru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach le'alam u'le'almei almaya יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. 226 ברכו את אדוני המבורך blessing from Mourning Light, page 228. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzeh or uvorei choshech oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Once again, Baruch atah Adonai. 228. Eloheinu melech haolam yotzeh or uvorei choshech oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. One more time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzeh or uvorei choshech oseh
on the top of page 229, in the beginning, even then, a new light was sown for the righteous, a promise that your light would become the catalyst, first for order and then for hope. Author of language and light, help us to use words as you have, to cast light into dark waters and draw out justice and truth. Ta Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot.
Continue on page 230 with our blessing for learning and teaching and abundant love. Ahava Rabbah. שבטחו בך, אהבו אמותינו, ותלמדם חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו תלמדנו, המרחם רחם עלינו, רחם עלינו, ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל, לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך והאר לימדנו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך. Clap your hands. ויחד למעננו, וידע ולירא את שמך, ולא נבוש, ולא ניכלם, ולא ניכשל, לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. Near the bottom of 230. אבינו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, ובנו בחרת, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. 232. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. 234. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, באמת. 240. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, עושה פלא שירה חדשה, שבחו גאולים לשמך שפת הים יחד כולם, הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. We rise together. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי כלי נאומך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני גר ישראל.
Amen. When we prayed Michamocha, we prayed our familiar text of freedom, the song our ancestors sang at the sea. And this week, we get a different episode in our Torah portion that happens almost exactly 40 years after that, where Moses in the wilderness hits a rock. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that later, but it's interesting to think that in that moment, he's hitting a rock as he's been told to do before. Perhaps he didn't do it exactly as he was told this time, but it is from a rock that the people, when they are parched in the desert, get their water. And that was the rock, in some level, that we just imagine God to be. Tzur Yisrael, our rock, a rock of Israel. Maybe that is a metaphor that works for you, or maybe it's not. But we perhaps take that metaphor and so many others into our Amidah, which begins on page 242 and onward. We'll pray the beginning together and then silently. And as we pray silently, work through these prayers, work through these pages, look for some way of accessing meaning, some way of accessing the divine through metaphors that are new and hopefully the right ones for you. Page 242.
Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Adonai, 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 Ata Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, V'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor VeHaNorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei HaKol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך Ata Adonai, Magen Avraham, Vezrat Sarah. 246. Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechayem et Imata Rav Lehoshia, Morid Hatal, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayem etim berachamim rabim, Somech nofelim verofei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato lishenei ahav, Michamocha pa'al geburot, Umidom melach, Melech memit umechayem, Umatzmiach Yeshua v'neheman ata l'chayot metim baruch ata Adonai mechayeh hametim. 248. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam kashem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom ka'katuv al yad neviecha v'kara zeh el zeh v'hamar kadosh 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 Adonai Tzevaot Melech kol haaretz kevodo Adir Adirenu Adonai Adonenu Adir Shimecha bechol haaretz Baruch kevod Adonai mimekomo Echad hu Eloheinu hu Avinu Malkeinu Moshienu vehu Yashmienu Berachamav le'nei kodai Ani Adonai Eloheitem Yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Tzion ledor vador Hallelujah ledor vador ledor vador ledor vador nagid God lecha louder ledor vador ledor vador ledor vador nagid God lecha ulenetzach netzachim ulenetzach netzachim kerushatecha nahakdish v'shivchacha Eloheinu midinu lo yamush leolam va'ed ledor vador ledor vador nagid God lecha ledor vador ledor vador nagid God lecha baruch ata Adonai ha'el hakadosh. We continue silently through page 261, using the words of these pages, using the words of these hearts, that they may be softened. And we've each found the words to our personal prayers, we may be seated. middle of 260.
We now call forward Joanna Pressman, member of our Board of Trustees, to offer us a few greetings and announcements on behalf of our board.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Let me start by thanking our clergy for leading us today, Rabbi Matt Green and Cantor Josh Breitzer. Also wanted to thank staff members who are supporting us today. We've got Gabi Savransky on audio and online support, and Nate Jaffe and Beth Maraver welcoming everybody and keeping things running smoothly here in the sanctuary. I also, of course, want to welcome everybody here today and online. In particular, I wanted to welcome everybody who's here as family and friends of our first members of our adult B'nai Mitzvah class who are being called to the Torah today. So welcome and Mazel Tov to Joy London and Rhonda Roper-Shear and Heather Miller and Louis Katzman. As we often hear our clergy say, this, of course, is the culmination of a lot of work, but just the beginning of you continuing to lead your lives as Jewish people. And I hope that your experience in the Adult B'nai Mitzvah program has helped you build a deeper sense of connection to your identity as Jews and to one another. And I am just so glad to be part of the CBE community with all of you. Again, welcome to everybody. I want to invite everybody after the conclusion of the service to join us downstairs in the rotunda for Kiddush to continue the celebration. And that's all for the announcements. Thank you all for being here, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for that. You can check the advisory for all the other things going on here at CBE, but Cantor Breitzer reminded me that there is one event that is not yet on the advisory, but should be, and you should all know about it, that on Thursday, July 21st, there is an Instagram account called Old Jewish Men, and they will be in our ballroom with a speed dating event. Old Jewish Men speed dating in the ballroom, but it is a friendly speed dating. It's a communal get-to-know-you kind of event. Everyone here is invited, all ages, and it should be an excellent time.
Did you see the reel that account posted, I think, yesterday?
I missed it.
It was an old Jewish man holding up a box of Entenmann's, asking the rhetorical question, why is it that all old Jewish men love Entenmann's? It was rhetorical.
Well, on that note, time to get some taluses. So at this point, we move into another tradition of our people, which is our adult B'nai Mitzvah will receive their prayer shawls, their taluses. And so we want to call you forward, Joy, Rhonda, Heather, and Louis. Come on up. And to present your talitot to you, we call up Susan Levy, Ruth Shear, Asher Miller, and Oliver and Julia Katzman. These people whom you've designated, these important people in your lives, will hand you this talus, and then we'll ask you to make the blessing all together. Ready? Go for it.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu b'tit latif b'tzitzit.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Yeah, no, it's good. Just put those on. All right. You can actually stay up here, all four of you, because it is time now to open the Ark and turn to our Torah service beginning on page 362 in your prayer books. Please rise. And we want to call forward a few friends to open the Ark, Didi Latcher and Sue Yavin, as well as Sharon Roper and Dr. Martha McKinney, and Luciana Solano and Doreen Nakamura. All of you that I just named, come forward and we'll go together to the Ark.
And who's going to process around with the Torah scrolls?
Oh, what an important question. And then on deck, once we get this Torah out forward here, we call forward Elliot and Kira Shear, Asher Miller, the Gibbons family, Oliver and Julia Katzman yet again, and the Kumar family to walk around for our Hakafah, to walk around with the Torah scrolls. So those that I just named, hang tight. We're going to bring the Torahs out to you, and everyone here, come forward with me. Page 362.
Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kemaasecha. Please rise. Malchutcha, malchut kol olamim, u'memeshatecha bechol dor vador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachamim heitiva v'irtzonecha et Zion. Tivnech omot Yerushalayim, Tivnech omot Yerushalayim. Ki v'cha levad atachnu, melech el ram v'nisa, Adon olamim. Page 364. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, u'devar Adonai mirushalayim. Page 366. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael. Walk down the stairs, walk down the stairs, walk down the stairs. V'kedush. Back to the lectern. Shato. We continue with the reciting of Shema, first by our B'nai Mitzvah and then by us in the Siddur on page 366 in the middle. Shema on the count of three, B'nai Mitzvah. 1, 2, 3.
Shema Yisrael
Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
We respond to Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu,
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Gadelu Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura V'Hatiferet V'Hanetzach V'Haon Ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz Ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha V'Haminaseh lechol rosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodesho. Again, romemu, keep clapping. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodesho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu, Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Al shlosha devarim, Al shlosha devarim, Al shlosha devarim, Haolam omer. Al shlosha devarim, Al shlosha devarim, Al shlosha devarim, Haolam omer. Get ready. Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Hallelu, 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 hallelu. Go back and say hallelu, hallelu, hallelu. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Please be seated.
This morning, there is a whole lot of Torah to uncover, from Parshat Hukat specifically. And so because we have 4 members of this community being called to the Torah, unlike on most Shabbat mornings where we chant Torah and then Haftorah and then hear words of Torah, Divrei Torah, we're going to begin with 2 sermons, 2 Divrei Torah, first from Joy London, and then Rhonda Roper-Shear. So Joy, call you forward.
Shabbat Shalom. Soon after I decided to write my Devar Torah about Hukat, this week's Torah portion, my partner gave me this book called the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Peculiar Pairs in Nature. At first, I thought she was making a veiled reference to the nature of our relationship, and moments later I realized she was. Reading the book, I was intrigued by a mysterious fun fact about the scarlet banksia, a native Australian shrub. Through the evolutionary mysteries of nature, fire, a destructive element, is the catalyst that perpetuates the reproductive life cycle of this gorgeous plant. The scorching heat of bushfires melts a protective layer of resin, separating the plant's hard cones from its regenerative seeds. Somehow, the fire allows the plant's burnt seeds to resprout into flowering seeds. Since fire is an element we associate with death and destruction, this seems like a contradiction. Yet fire plays an essential role in the survival and reproduction of the scarlet banksia. It's a scientific paradox, if there ever was one. This week's Torah reading, Chukat, from chapter 19 of the book of Numbers, opens with one of the ultimate biblical paradoxes, the ritual laws of purifying a red heifer. Like the paradox in the scarlet banksia anecdote, the sacred myth of the red heifer features a riddle so bizarre and so perplexing that even the wise King Solomon was unable to solve it. The riddle goes like this: how can the burnt ashes of a red heifer purify the contaminated while at the same time contaminate the pure? Before tackling this illogical riddle, we must first understand the biblical laws of Tahara and Tumah so that we can understand how people viewed purity in the day. Each of these laws describe a state of being. Tahara is a state of spiritual balance, whereas Tumah is a state of spiritual imbalance. Tumah occurred when the ancient Israelites were in the presence of dead human bodies, and it was a frequent occurrence during the 40 years they endured plagues, rebellions, and wars as they wandered through the wilderness on the way to the Promised Land. In Numbers 19, we read about the ashes of a dead cow mixed with several cleansing detergents and pure spring water. This ash-laced cocktail, called the water of purification, rid an Israelite of tumah by magically reversing the state of impurity from corpse contamination. This reversed the state of tumah to tahara, thus restoring one's spiritual balance. Verses 2 through 6 describe in meticulous detail the recipe for this water of purification. The step-by-step recipe called for Eleazar, a ritually pure high priest, to slaughter an animal. This animal was a symbolically perfect red-haired heifer, a young, unbred animal without spots or abnormalities that was never made to endure the burden of a yoke. Along with Eleazar, several other pure, non-priest laymen also officiated at this ceremonial rite. The central paradox of the ceremony of the red heifer is this. During the preparation of the water of purification, Eleazar and his assistants, all ritually pure from the outset, transformed during the process of performing the mitzvah from a state of purity to a state of impurity. The question is, why did the water of purification contaminate Eleazar and his assembly line of pure men? And curiously, why did God decree this commandment with its contradiction as a permanent law, a hok, to be obeyed under threat of excommunication? The earliest commentators of rabbinic Judaism struggled in vain to understand the nagging puzzle of the red heifer. Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, who lived during the final days of the Second Temple era, dismissed the paradox outright. He said, when it comes to God's laws, there isn't anything to explain. Obedience is needed, God laid down a statute, and you may not transgress it. Hezekiah ben Manoah, a 13th century French rabbi, astutely observed, we find one thing can have two opposite effects. Fire melts metal, whereas the same fire, when used to boil eggs, makes the interior of these eggs get harder. When discussing the red heifer paradox, Hezekiah theorized that a paradox was a natural phenomenon of the animal, and God, the creator of nature, should not be questioned. Rashi took the easy way out. When asked about the meaning of the red heifer, he remarked simply, "The commandment is self-explanatory." Maimonides, however, thought it was important to delve into the matter more deeply. He said, even though all the chukim in the Torah are divine laws, it is worthy to explain the rationale for every mitzvah. He also argued that these laws are hardly pointless or lacking in useful purpose, but if you think certain commandments are in vain, the fault lies in your understanding. Like Maimonides, I too am inclined to explore a rational explanation for the red heifer paradox. I thought of a relevant modern-day contradiction. Laboratory personnel wear protective clothing such as gloves, goggles, and masks while preparing weakened live virus vaccines of measles, mumps, and rubella. Today's advances in medicine allow healthcare workers to inject these impurities, tuma, into our bodies to immunize us against the very diseases we're trying to prevent. In this medical example, we have the same contradiction we see in the red heifer, a substance that contaminates those who prepare it, yet still strengthens and protects those who receive its final product. So what is the meaning we can glean from the red heifer commandment? Although we no longer incinerate perfect red-haired cows, is there a message behind the ritual's apparent paradox, one that is relevant to us today? The red heifer presents an immensely powerful message. When confronted with a seeming logical contradiction, and there can be several that arise each day if you watch for them, we must rely on our intellect, our imagination, and ingenuity to understand the physical possibilities beyond the existing laws of nature. Indeed, the initial reaction of scientists injecting viruses into our bodies seemed like a dangerous possibility. Yet today, we know there is no contradiction in immunization science. Similarly, botanists now know why the scarlet banksia is killed by fire before it mysteriously flowers anew. So I invite you to explore the mystery of paradox. Embrace the endless capacity of the human mind. Meditate on it. Sit in fascination and embrace the wonderment of contradiction. Be comfortable with its inconsistency, incompatibility, and contingency. The framework of possible worlds awaits you. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach, joy. We now call forward Rhonda Roper-Shear.
Shabbat Shalom. As we've heard, this week's Torah portion includes a mysterious ritual around death. This preamble to the Parsha is especially appropriate since death so frequently appears in Chukat. In this Parsha, both Miriam and Aaron, Moses' siblings and two of Israel's three great leaders in the wilderness, die. But the descriptions of their deaths and the community's reactions to them are very different. What struck me in this is this considerable discrepancy between Miriam and Aaron's death. There is only one brief verse about the death of Miriam. The Torah states, Miriam died there and was buried there. There's no mention of Miriam's cause of death nor mourning for Miriam by her brothers or the people of Israel. This one verse follows 27 verses describing the ritual of the red heifer, the rules for repurifying a person after contact with a corpse. It is strange to have only a single verse on her demise when Miriam was an essential prophet who shaped Jewish history. Of course, relatively few women are mentioned in the Torah by name and role compared by men. It is not recorded in the Torah, but many ancient and medieval commentaries say that she provided water to the Israelites in the desert for 40 years with her magical well. Why then is there no mention of how she died or of the community mourning for her? In contrast, the description of Aaron's death, which comes after Miriam's death, is very detailed. His death is foreshadowed when he and Moses produce water after Miriam's death. Instead of speaking to the rock as God directs them, Moses strikes the rock, and God forbids them from entering the land of Israel. When it is time for Aaron to go, his death is dramatized by having God send him up the mountain. His legacy, represented in his priestly garments, is then passed down to his son Eleazar. And after he dies, the people of Israel mourn him for 30 days. In many ways, Aaron's death is considered ideal. The contrast between how the people mourn Aaron and the silence over Miriam's death is stunning. Jewish scholar Orahon Prauser interprets Moses' behavior in striking the rock as not only out of frustration with the Israelites. She finds a clue in the coincidence of the 4 Hebrew consonants M, R, Y, M, which form the word morim, meaning rebels. Moses cries, "Listen, you rebels," before hitting the rock. She notes that the same consonants in the same order form Miriam's name, and argues their use suggests that Moses recalled his sister when trying to accomplish Miriam's former task of producing water. Moses' suppressed grief for her causes him to strike the rock instead of speaking to it. Prauser says, Moses may have learned the hard way that the public silence about Miriam's loss was a mistake. Perhaps the elaborate mourning for Aaron reflects what Moses gleaned from that lesson. I would add that since the entire community participated in mourning Aaron for 30 days, it seems like the community also learned from not giving voice to their grief over Miriam's passing, nor celebrating her contributions to Jewish society. This lesson that the people learned about mourning for an extended time was not lost on our ancient rabbis. They looked at the number 30, as in the days the Israelites mourned Aaron, and determined that 30 days represents a unique measure of time in the grieving process. For this reason, we observe Shloshim, an extra few weeks after Shiva, to really sit in the feelings of loss and be intentional about saying Kaddish. Not only did the people learn the importance of mourning, but they understood the different sequences of time necessary when saying goodbye to a loved one. This lesson has been manifesting in my own life and experiences with grief and mourning. Before I converted to Judaism, my father died. I was fortunate to visit him and my family in Fresno, California, just before he passed. When he was buried, my family and I returned for his funeral service a month later, and I found that very meaningful. However, between his death and when I returned to New York after the funeral, I experienced a profound sense of loss and isolation. A friend identified for me the crushing feeling I had in my chest as being heartache. I did not know what to do with my grief. I moved from being short-tempered to teary within seconds. I was lost. 2 years later, my father-in-law passed away. For the first time, I experienced the Jewish rituals of mourning. My husband and I held Shiva in our home. We also attended services at CBE, reciting the mourner's Kaddish and acknowledging his yahrzeit. Having these rituals as part of the mourning process was helpful to me, and also contrasted sharply with my experience of mourning my father. As our children completed their B'nai Mitzvah, I committed to converting to Judaism. What I had learned about mourning and ritual was a vital factor in making that choice. In the years after my conversion to Judaism, I have found still deeper meaning in these rituals of farewell. When my mother passed away last year, it was an opportunity to experience mourning from within Judaism, offering me the space and structure I desperately needed. The heartache will always be there, but practicing Shiva as a home-based ritual provided a framework for my mourning to exist within. I found great comfort in practicing those rituals and in the support I received from our community and clergy at CBE. In this way, my own story mirrors the story of the Israelites in this parsha. I have learned the importance of mourning and ritual. Although the Israelites failed to mourn her properly, in some ways, Miriam's death led them to build better ritual practices in the face of future deaths. In this sense, Miriam still led the people in death as she did in life, since she pushed them towards building essential rituals. From the rituals that were created after her passing, we can still feel her influence. Unfortunately, the patriarchal society that produced the Torah could not fully celebrate and mourn Miriam by name. However, the broader arc of this Torah portion, as it informs contemporary Jewish mourning rituals, demonstrates that Miriam's legacy lives on for us. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach, Rhonda. One thing that we didn't say at the very beginning of our Torah service, but which I'm compelled to say now, is that it is a thrilling, breathtaking, unique experience to be in this space watching the four of you begin our adult B'nai Mitzvah of this summer. You have all worked so hard. And we're just at the beginning, believe it or not, of our service. But as we've said before, we're just at the beginning also of your Jewish journeys. And so we now move into another component of this Torah service. We now move into reading from the Torah. And as you've heard, we're reading Parashat Chukat, and specifically numbers 19 and 20. And we'll call out the verses too, but you have them here in your programs. And you can find them on page 1024 of our Chumash. That is the book that has the Torah written on it and within it. But that's what it says on the cover, is the Torah. You'll want that separate book to follow along with our Torah service now. And for our first Aliyah, we call forward Joy London. And in addition to Joy, who will be chanting, we call forward her friend Alan Cantor to make the blessing.
Tamod, 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 abat mitzvah rishona chedva, bad Eliyasu aliyah Torah, chizeki ve'imetzi.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Mevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bochar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe ve'el Aharon Lemor Zot Chukat HaTorah Asher Tziva Adonai Lemor Daber El Bnei Yisrael V'yikchu elecha farah adumah timimah asher ein ba mum asher lo ala aleha ol untatem ota el Elazar HaKohen V'hotzi ota el michutz lamachane V'shachat ota lefanav V'lakach Elazar HaKohen midama Ba'etzba'o v'hizah el nochach penei ohel moed Mitama Sheva Pe'amim.
Let's hear her voice.
This one right here. Baruch Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natabotenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Am I sitting or standing?
For our second aliyah, we call back Rhonda to chant, and also for the blessing we call Jeffrey, Rhonda's husband.
Tamod, 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 bat mitzvah shenit, Ronia, bat Avraham v'Sara, l'aliyah l'Torah, chizki ve'imtzei.
Baruch
Et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Vayavo uvnei Yisrael kol ha'edah ha'midbar zin b'chodesh harishon vayeshev ha'am b'kadesh v'tamot sham Miriam v'tikaver sham v'lo hayamayim la'edah Vayigahalu al Moshe ve'al Aharon Vayarev ha'am im Moshe Vayomeru lemor Vilu gavadnu Bigva achenu lifnei Adonai Vilama havetem et kehal Adonai El Hamidbar Hazel Lamud Sham Anachnu Uvirenu Vilama Ha'elitunu Mimizraim Lehavid Otanu El Hamakom Hara Hazel Lo Mikom Zera Utenahak v'gefen v'rimon umayim ayin lishtot vayavo Moshe ve'Aharon mipnei hakahal el petach ohel moed vayiplu al pneihem Vayerach chivud Adonai Alehem.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nota b'tokenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
That was awesome. And now, for our third aliyah, we call forward to the Amud, Heather Miller.
Tamod, 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 abat mitzvah shlishit, chava bat Avraham v'Sara, l'aliyah l'Torah, chizki ve'imtzei. We are in Numbers chapter 20, verse 7. Numbers chapter 20, verse 7.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hambarak.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah. Okay. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Kach et hamateh vehakehel et haedah ata ve'aharon achicha v'dibartem el hasela le'enehem v'natan meimav ve'hotzita lahem mayim min hasela v'hishkita et ha'edah ve'et be'iram. Vayikach Moshe et hamateh milifnei Adonai ka'asher tzivahu. Vayakehilu Moshe ve'aharon et hakahal el pinei hasala. Vayomer lahem shimuna hamorim hamin hasela hazeh notzi lachem mayim. Vayarem Moshe et yado vayach et hasela b'matehu pa'amayim vayitzeu mayim rabim vatesh ha'edah uva'iram. Did it. Oh, yep. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chaye olam nota betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
I did it.
And now for our fourth and final Aliyah, we call forward Louis Katzman to chant. And for the blessing, we call forward Oliver and Julia Katzman.
Yamod, 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 Abar Mitzvah, Ari, Ben Dvorot Feslan Aliyah Torah, Chazak ve'amat.
Take the corner of your tongue.
Baruch et Adonai Hamborah.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborah le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Verse 18.
Vayomer. Hold on a second. This helps. Vayomer Elav Edom lo ta'avor bi'i pen b'cherev eitzei likratecha. Vayomeru Elav b'nei Yisrael b'misilah na'aleh V'imei mecha nishte ani umiknai v'natati michram רק אין דבר ברגלי אעבורה. ויאמר לא תעבור, ויצא אדום לקראתו, ועם כבד וביד חזקה. וימאן אדום נתון את ישראל עבור בגבולו, ויית ישראל מעליו. וייסעו מקדש, ויבואו בני ישראל, כל העדה אור ההר. ויאמר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון בהור ההר, על גבול ארץ אדום לאמור. יאסף אהרון אל עמיו, כי לא יבוא אל הארץ אשר נתתי לבני ישראל, על אשר מריתם את פי לימי מריבה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nota betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Yasher Koach, all four of you. That was extraordinary. And now, in the presence of our Torah, as we do each week, we offer another blessing, a prayer for healing, a mishaberach. And so if you are thinking of someone this morning, thinking of someone in need of healing, of mind, body, or spirit, I'm going to walk around and invite you to share names with us, people who need a little extra koach, a little extra strength and healing, at the break between the stanzas. So we'll begin this blessing, or this prayer, and invite you to consider who it is in your lives that needs a little bit of healing. And you can share their names in just a moment. You can find the words of this prayer on page 371.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
We pray for healing on behalf of the following people.
We pray together. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
It is now time to lift and dress our Torah. And so we want to invite up Asher Miller, come on up, as well as Elliot Roper-Shear and Jonathan Gibbons to roll and dress the Torah. Please rise.
The bottom of page 370. Bezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe bifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. Torah, 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 tiva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tiva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tiva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tiva lanu Moshe. Orasha keinat Yaakov, Orasha keinat Yaakov, Orasha keinat Yaakov, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Adonai, la 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 Adonai, la 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 Adonai, ya la 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 la, ya 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 Adonai, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 Adonai, la 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 la. Please be seated. Everyone, that is, except Louis. Louis, you're going to chant some Haftarah for us, right? Come on up. You know, a lot of people think that Haftarah and Torah are related etymologically, but they're actually spelled completely differently. It's not half a Torah.
You sure about that?
I'm pretty sure.
Never knew.
So should we tell them where to find the verses he's chanting?
That is right. You can go back to that book that says the Torah on it, although this is not the Torah. And it's from the book of Judges, and it's on page 1046, book of Judges, chapter 11, verses 30 through 33. So what we're seeing here, as we frequently say on Saturday mornings, is that we're seeing Torah move through time. We began with your Torah chanting, all four of you. And now we're moving into a reading from prophets, and soon enough we'll hear even more words from Torah from both Louis and from Heather. So once again, that's on page 1046.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar bin ve'im tovim v'ratzah v'divrehem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai haboher b'Torah uv Moshe avdo uv Yisrael amo uvin v'yei ha'emet v'atzedek. Vayidar yiftach neder l'Adonai vayomar im naton titein et bnei Ammon biyadi v'haya hayotzei asher yetzei midaltei veiti ligrati bishuvi v'shalom mibnei Ammon v'haya l'Adonai v'ha'alitihu ola v'ya'avor yiftach el b'nei Ammon lihilachem ba'am v'yitneim Adonai b'yado v'yakem me'aro'er ve'ad bo'acha minit esrim ir ve'ad avel kiramim maka gidula me'od vayikanu b'nei Ammon mibnei b'nei Yisrael. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol ha'olamim tzadik b'chol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh ha'medaber u'mikayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek al ha'torah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'nevi'im ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh Shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likedusha v'limenucha likavod ultifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umevarechim otach yitbarak shimcha befi kol hai hamid liolam vaed Baruch ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Yasher Koach, Lewis. And now we have two more Divrei Torah, two more sermons, explorations of what this Torah portion is all about. And first we'll hear from Lewis.
Shabbat Shalom. As you've heard, a lot happens in this week's Torah portion, Hukat. Joy related how God instructed the Israelite people on the ritual laws for purification. Rhonda told us of the deaths of Miriam and Aaron. And Moses, as you will hear from Heather, is prevented from entering the land of Israel. But that isn't all. The Israelites have now spent 40 years wandering in search of their promised land. It has been trying times with lots of hardship, so it is not unexpected that here in this parsha, the people grow restive and complain. In fact, throughout their wandering, the Israelites are constantly complaining and losing their faith in their ability to complete their journey. In the wilderness, for instance, when they are hungry, they say, "If only we had died by the hand of God in the land of Egypt where we ate our fill of bread." The list goes on. Each time, God intervenes to help, with the exception of my Torah portion. After setting out from Mount Hor following their battle with the Canaanites, the Israelites once again grow restive. To Moses they say, "Why did you make us leave Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread, not water, and we have come to loathe this miserable food." This time, God does not provide salvation or fulfill their wishes. Instead, he sends venomous serpents against them. It is a truly bizarre episode that now God actually punishes the people by sending serpent demons to bite and kill them. Why does he punish them this time? What was different? One answer from our tradition is that the people are ungrateful. Gersonides points out that they did indeed have food and water, so we're complaining for no reason. They have grown tired of eating the manna that God sent them. That which tasted like wafers and honey, they now view as miserable food. Rashi also highlights that when they complain this time, they speak out not just against Moses, but also against God. This lack of appreciation is what draws God's wrath. Remember, the people are in the desert in the first place because God is redeeming them. They've wandered for so long and they are so close, but instead of seeing the bigger picture, they instead focus on the trivial things that they don't have rather than what they do have. What looks to them like pain or suffering is actually part of their redemption. Maybe this is the lesson that God is teaching them. In the Torah, the story begins by saying the Israelites once again grow restive. According to Rashi, the expression translated here as restive refers to something that one cannot bear mentally, a situation that they are not broad-minded enough to accept. To me, this speaks to the importance of perspective and the power of beliefs. Are you someone who sees the glass half full or half empty? How we view ourselves and the situation we find ourselves in shapes our belief, which in turn influences how we act. If we believe we are unlucky, unfortunate, or unworthy, then like the Israelites, we might feel hopeless and lost. This in turn will blind us to the good fortune before us. The lack of broad-mindedness can actually prevent us from taking timely action and seizing the opportunities around us. Seeing their error, the Israelites repent and beg Moses to intervene on their behalf. So God instructs Moses to make a seraph serpent and place it on a pole. Whoever looked up at this serpent would then be healed. The obvious question this raises is, why a serpent? Aren't they the problem in the first place? After all, it was a serpent that caused Adam and Eve to be banished from the Garden of Eden. So it is puzzling that God would use the serpent now as both a source of harm and healing. We must then consider what the serpent represents. Rambam says that this is the way of the Torah, every deed of which is a miracle within a miracle. In other words, there is a lot more to unpack here. He goes on to say, the Torah removes injury by means of the cause of injury and heals illness by means of the cause of the illness. The very word seraph, used to describe the type of serpent that God sent in Hebrew, means angel. But it also comes from the word fire, thus suggesting a seraph serpent is something that can both harm and heal. There are lots of examples in life where the same thing that harms can also heal. Only the venom of a poisonous snake can be used to make its cure. Vaccines are made from the same virus that caused the disease. Even our COVID-19 pandemic, something that caused great harm, also became a source for good. Workers gained more flexibility and saved time from their daily commutes. New technologies improved virtual collaboration. For families who lost or were separated from loved ones, it was a time of tragedy. For others, it served to unite them. Throughout that lockdown, my family got in the habit of going for daily walks, watching classic movies together, every single movie from the James Bond series, and having endless discussions or debates, and even some fights, on the state of the world. Things that certainly brought us closer together during that time. As our sages point out, only by deliberately looking up at the copper serpent and subordinating their hearts to their Father in heaven could the Israelites be healed. To me, the copper serpent represents the hardships and fears of the Israelites. The broader lesson here is not just to be grateful, although that's important. The broader lesson is that sometimes when things seem painful, if you just take a step back, deliberate, and look at the bigger picture, you may find that whatever it is that pains you is actually what saves you. Right before the pandemic, the company I worked for decided to shut my division down, and as a result, I lost my job. Initially, I was afraid, upset, and depressed. I wasn't sure what to do next. I thought long and hard about how I got to where I was and what I might want to do next. Eventually, I looked at losing my job as a blessing in disguise. Like the serpent, it was both something that harmed, but could also heal. I was presented with an opportunity to do something I would not have otherwise done. So I opened my mind to the possibilities and faced my fears of not being good enough, knowledgeable enough, or even lucky enough. And I started my own company. And even though the pandemic hit shortly after, and I didn't close a single deal for 6 months, I never lost sight of my goal. With the support and encouragement of my family, my friends, here today, I have persevered. I found a new partner who also became a good friend. Together, we are finding success in this new venture. We all have our own copper serpents to face, and today I'm happy to have faced mine. Shabbat Shalom.
And we now call forward Heather Miller to offer us her words of Torah.
Shabbat Shalom. I got lucky with my Torah portion. No detailed descriptions of priest garments or lengthy lists of acceptable sacrifices. Instead, a powerful story about the very human feelings within Moses and his changing relationship with God and the Israelites. I will say at the outset that reading this story at this moment in my life really brought home the living nature of the Torah. Here's a brief recap. With God showing the way, Moses and Aaron brought the Israelites to Kadesh, the wilderness. The Israelites became enraged because there was no water, their water source having ceased with Miriam's death. They quarreled with Moses and Aaron, and they complained that it would have been better to remain slaves in Egypt than to die of hunger and thirst in the wilderness. God told Moses and Aaron to take the rod they had used previously to get water from a rock by striking it, as recounted in the book of Exodus. This time, with the community assembled before them, they were to command a rock to give water. Instead, Moses spoke harshly to the people, saying, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" He then struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came forth. God then spoke to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I had given them." What gives? After leading the Israelites out of slavery, serving as mediator between the people and God, and wandering the desert for 40 years, how could Moses be allowed to perish before entering the promised land? Many people have pondered the reasons behind God's harsh punishment. In the 12th century, Maimonides wrote that Moses experienced a failure of leadership, shown by the anger with which he spoke to the Israelites. By revealing his frustration, by hitting the rock rather than commanding it, Moses' actions set a poor example for his community by showing anger as an appropriate response. Bekhor Shor, a 12th century French poet and rabbi, wrote that the punishment stemmed from Moses asking, "Shall we get water from this rock?" implying that he and Aaron would produce water themselves, as opposed to a miracle attributable to God. Ibn Ezra and Babenu Bachya of 11th and 12th century Spain said that Moses' sin was in striking the rock twice. In the book of Exodus, one strike produced water, but in Numbers, Moses struck the rock twice, making it seem as though God's power had lessened. I found the greatest resonance in the writings of the late British rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who died in November of 2020. He said that while great leaders share qualities such as courage, integrity, adaptability, and a sensitivity to the needs of their people, each leader, here I'm quoting, must be sensitive to the call of the hour, this generation, this chapter in the long story of a people. And because he or she is of a specific generation, even the greatest leader cannot meet the challenges of a different generation. That is not a failing. It is the existential condition of humanity. Rabbi Sacks suggested that it was past time for Moses and Aaron to lead. The generation they had brought out of Egypt were dead, struck down by God for their lack of faith that God would deliver them safely to Canaan. Moses and Aaron were worn down by their people's constant complaints. Speaking with anger and hitting the rock were very human acts of frustration. God's punishment was a means to move Moses and Aaron aside to make room for a new leader to take the people forward. In other words, the relationship between Moses and the community he led had changed. Rabbi Sachs asserted that a true leader teaches his or her followers so that they might further their own cause after that leader is gone. He quotes Rabbi Tarfon, who lived through the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70. Rabbi Tarfon wrote, "It is not for you to complete the task, but neither are you free to disengage from it." This ties in with something Rabbi Timoner said at Shabbat services last week, which I will do my best to paraphrase. She said that a leader serves a function that has nothing to do with themselves, that he or she is a vessel for channeling the energies and desires of the people he or she leads. Leadership comes from a source beyond the leader, and leadership is meant to be passed on. I read the story of Moses and Aaron and the rock over and over as I prepared for today. How cruel this parsha seems, yet how it resonated with me. After 40 years of struggle and selflessness, Moses and Aaron had to make way for a generational shift. Maybe by striking the rock, Moses was acting out the insecurity he felt about losing his connection to his people. There are so many ideas about what this parsha means, coming from rabbis and commentators who devoted their lives to the study of Torah. I think about loss of connection all the time, but as a regular person with my own 21st century perspective, I can't help but see the parallels to my own life right now. It's difficult to experience the progressive invisibility that comes with age, my growing irrelevance in the eyes of my children. In our 20s and 30s, we think the world was made for us, and it will always be so. And it is for a while. But there comes a time when attention shifts to the next generation. Sometimes I find myself needed and noticed less, listened to less. I remember the freedom and excitement of entering adulthood. Although I dearly loved my parents, my reliance on their guidance faded. Now I see my children on that cusp. While I celebrate every step toward independence they take, each one is a step away from me and the role I've grown into and the intimacy of our shared home. I hope that the example I've tried to set and the lessons I've tried to impart to my boys enable them to go farther. As they approach adulthood, it is time to step back and let them take responsibility for their own paths forward. Shabbat Shalom.
I'm feeling kind of verklempt. Joy, Heather, Rhonda, and Louis. Yasher Koach. You are our brave Nachshonim, jumping headfirst into the sea of Torah. And now I know I've said this a few times, but I just want to make it very clear to everyone here that this process really began in not the darkest days, but among some dark days of the pandemic. This process began almost 2 years ago when we could only meet by Zoom. And you chose to do this. You chose to do something kind of strange, something that maybe you've wanted to do for a while, something that was unusual. And it was unusual because, as it happens, each of you are already Jewish adults. You've been among the ranks of Jewish adults for some time, participating fully in the life of this congregation, taking classes, meeting friends, wending and winding through the life cycle, traveling with all of us. So what is it then that happens for each of you today, as you are now B'nai Mitzvah? For one thing, you can celebrate the chance or the opportunity to chant and read Torah, of course, add it to your resumes or brag about it to your friends. And what's more, you can feel accomplished that you did the thing you set out to do 18 months ago or longer. But most important of all, in some ways, is that by being called to the Torah today and by teaching us, you have brought out a sacredness within you that was always there, just calling out to be expressed. This parsha begins with the words that Joy you chanted, Zot Chukat HaTorah. This is the law of the Torah. It goes on to explore, as we've now become expert in, the laws of purification after death. The Sfat Emet, a great Hasidic sage that we talk about frequently here, taught that the phrasing in the Torah of Zot Chukat HaTorah means that by words of Torah, one can actually purify oneself. He points out that as we say each morning, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi, my God, the soul that you have given me is pure. Already our souls were pure, but, says the Sfat Emet, there are things in life that make us feel sometimes like we're not pure. Our imperfections, our doubts, our ignorances. And through Torah, we remember our inherent purity as human beings. Every soul has a portion in the Torah, he explains, in some letter or vowel point. Words of Torah themselves can never be defiled. And when we study Torah and teach Torah, as you did, we're reminded of something eternally and whole and right within ourselves. The Hasidic reading here is that though at times we human beings may feel doubtful of our capacity to bring sacredness into the world, when we engage with Torah, grapple with it, and transmit it before our peers, we remember anew our value and capabilities. And this is, I hope, among the many lessons that you've learned by becoming B'nai Mitzvah this morning, and I hope you memorize the feeling of bringing sacredness into the world. So may it sustain you for long, long into the future. Now what I'm going to do is call each of you individually up here to join me at this lectern. First, Joy. Joy, you came to CBE a few years ago after the attack at the synagogue, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And you knew you were seeking something, but you weren't quite sure what it was. Now, you may have found more in this synagogue than you bargained for. But by throwing yourself fully into Shabbat services and every class we had to offer, you found your place here with us. May this experience today affirm those choices and be just one point on a long map leading toward Torah and Jewish community. Now, Rhonda, join us if you would. It's your turn to come up. Rhonda, in addition to a rich teaching, you brought us today along your journey toward Jewish community. It is so rare to read Torah and recognize a distinction in one's mindset before and after coming to Judaism. Now, I was lucky enough to witness that transition firsthand, and all of us here are lucky to learn from it, to grow with you, and to deepen our awareness of how important rituals can be in times of pain, and in general, in times of happiness as well. The Torah is yours. May you come to find so many moments in which your heart overflows with Torah, and may you find the boldness always to share them. Heather, looking at you. Okay. Your journey to Judaism began formally long, long ago. And this ceremony may have been out of sight for much of that time. Now, I've had the honor of working with other members of your family on B'nai Mitzvah ritual moments, which is also true of Rhonda and Lewis as well. But Heather, I'm so glad you decided to go for it, to ritualize this moment in your life, which belongs more and more to you, as you taught us. May you continue to find your place here and share all that you have to give without a doubt that it is right. And finally, Lewis, come on up. Lewis, it was way back in 2018, my first year as a rabbi, when you decided to take Intro to Judaism here at CBE. And though neither you nor I had a sense that your exploration of Judaism would lead you here, your commitment to study and to your peers has been palpable throughout my knowing you. May you continue to bite off more Torah than you can chew, and find that it is delicious and nourishing. As you watch your youngest called to the Torah, may you kvel with a newfound appreciation of Jewish mystery. Look at what you've accomplished. It is really extraordinary, and it's not every day that you get to complete a process such as this. Memorize what it feels like to be surrounded by peers who love you just like this. And now I want to invite everyone here to please rise if you are able. And I'm going to offer you the priestly benediction. And I'm going to actually do that privately, so I'm going to set down this microphone.
Siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, yehelanu, 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 ulecho Yisrael, yehelanu, yehelanu, ulecho Yisrael, yehelanu, yehelanu, ulecho Yisrael, yehelanu, yehelanu, ulecho Yisrael. We remain standing and turn to page 374 as our B'nai Mitzvah helped by Green return this Torah to the Ark. 374. Kelekach tov natati lachem Torati al tazovu etz chaim lamachazikim ba Page 586 in the middle. Aleinu l'shabeach. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, לתת גאולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. The top of page 591. Let's read these words together. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and to light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד
As we move into the conclusion of our service this morning, our thoughts turn to words of the Mourner's Kaddish. And if you are here observing Shiva, or the first week of mourning, I want to invite you to rise and share a name of someone you're thinking of. If you are here observing Shloshim, or the first 30 days of mourning, please rise and share a name. If you're here observing Shana, the first year of mourning, please rise and share a name. If you are observing a yahrzeit, or the anniversary of a death, please also rise and share a name. In solidarity with our mourners, I invite you all to please rise as we remember those whom we've lost in the last 30 days. Judy Rabinowitz, mother of Josh Rabinowitz, mother-in-law of Janet Gotchman and grandmother of Jake and Zoe. Marcia Israelite Lieberman, mother of Lisa Lieberman and grandmother of Allie and Maddie. Herbert Fleischer, father of Matt Fleischer Black, father-in-law of Jessica Fleischer Black and grandfather of Rose and Kate. Sylvia Binder, mother of Karen Binder, mother-in-law of Victor Ney, grandmother of Rebecca, Jeremy, and David, and great-grandmother of Rose. And Daniel Taubenblatt, brother of Lisa Taubenblatt, brother-in-law of Jonathan Roberts, and uncle of Aiden. We also bring to mind the memory of the loved ones of our B'nai Mitzvah, Eve, Hyman, and Elias London, Eleanor and Jerry Roper, and Leo Shear, Nancy and Hebron Adams, and Joan and Jack Miller, and Hugh Maddox. In addition to those names, we mentioned the names of all those who have yahrzeits on this Shabbat. Doris Balter, Hattie Baum, Lillian Bernstein, Miriam Ann Bernstein, Gertrude Blaustein, Shirley Bleiberg, Charles Block, Samuel Brockman, Evelyn Clement, Robert Cohen, Hazel Kronheim, Annie Laurie Hamilton Donaldson, Rabbi Dr. A. Stanley Dreyfus, Stu Esco, Martin Goldberg, Helen Goodman, Michael Goodstein, Reuben Green, Michael Hiller, Louis Holland, Harry Jaffa, Louis Jaffe, Marguerite Aaron Yusufthal, Siegfried Katz, Sarah Korostchevskaya, Frederick Leff, Lillian Leibner, Saul Mayer, Amelia Maruk, Jeanette Minkoff, Sylvia Mishkin, Lee Morganlander, Abraham Nachman, Nathan Niederfer, Leo Podber, Babette Schmidt, Joyce Salmansky, Hedva Lang Schuckman, Sanford Silverberg, Shirley Singer, Edward Starr, Isidore Sussman, Jean Thomasis, Matthew Waxman, David Wallach, Bernie Wasco, Gus Weil, and Dr. Joseph Zimmerman. We say Zichronam Livracha, may all of their memories be for a blessing, as we turn to page 598 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma tivrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala v'izman kariv imru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechamata damiran ve'alma ve'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisroel ve'imru. Amen. Yoseh shalom b'mramav hu yaseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
May the one who makes peace in the high places make peace over us and over all who mourn, as we say, Amen.
Ose shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevet ve'imru. Amen. Ose shalom. Let's hear you sing it. Ose shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru. Amen. Yalalai, let's hear you clapping. Yalalalala, yalalalala, yalalala, yalalala, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru. Amen. Just your voices, yalalai. Let's go. Yeah. Come on. Louder. Come on, B'nai Mitzvah, get your families into it. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, Mazel Tov. Kiddush is downstairs, out those doors, right?
Out those doors and out those doors, any of the doors that you'd like to go out, but in the rotunda.
Yeah.
In the rotunda downstairs. And make sure to pick up a red heifer cookie.
Oh.
I see Nate has a few over there, and I think Beth has some back there too. Oh, she flung one. Shabbat Shalom and
Shabbat
Mazel Tov.
Shalom.
See you downstairs.
Downstairs.
Hi, everyone. Not to be a nudge, but if everyone could go downstairs to enjoy the lovely Kiddush, that would be much appreciated.